This MGA Roadster belonged to my grandfather, who passed away very recently. He used to take us out for drives when we were younger, and now I'm the custodian, and it is rather a big responsibility. He was called Raymond Greenway, but I knew him affectionately as Dodo. He imported her in 1990, and she was converted to right-hand drive and painted this very sexy red colour. And the number plate was also changed. She's now FSK, which actually leads to what her name is, which is Frisky, which I think is quite appropriate because she's a very fun car, very sexy. I've never owned anything of value like this before. I've always driven banged up Ford Fiestas, so this is quite a step up for me. So I wouldn't say I was an enthusiast, but I'd always had a kind of interest in cars, and having my grandfather take me out for trips in the countryside in this car as a youngster, I'd always looked at it with, you know, big doughy eyes, thinking, wow, that's really cool. We've spent many an afternoon now with the bonnet up, tinkering. I've learnt what tinkering actually means, and it's just spending hours tweaking bits and pieces in the engine, changing how it sounds, how it works, learning about what needs oil, what needs grease, what kind of bits need to be sort of get the rust off. We've repainted bits inside, but now owning this, it's such a responsibility. It's completely changed my view of what ownership of a vehicle can be, because this isn't just an A to B car, this is an absolute joy. And she came off the production line in 1960. Originally she was baby blue and she had white tyres and she was left-hand drive, built for export to America. I've got all the original documentation, so my grandfather kept everything. He was very much a man of record. So I've managed to kind of trace back and find that she lived in California for 30 years. Got kind of visions of, you know, sunset cruises along the coastline in California, all that kind of thing. And that in itself is, knowing about the history, is giving me things that I would quite like to do to it. I mean, goodness knows how you'd get a car over to America, whether you just put it on a boat and off you go. But I'd like to think that one day I could take her back to where she came from and do some driving around California. Yeah, so she won the Monte Carlo Challenge in '91, and that's when Dodo became the full owner of her. And I've actually got photographs of him with his best friend. He's called Dennis Clark, and he's 93, and he still owns his MG, and it's the same colour. I think it's a TA. And they used to go off driving together around the country. They did quite a few trips together, and there's a particular stretch that heads towards Baldock that you'd really open her up, and I remember that quite vividly, the kind of roar of the engine, and you sort of, there's no seatbelts in the car, so I'd sort of hold on to the bottom of the seat for kind of dear life when I was a child, but as you get older you kind of don't get as nervous. So he had her until 2017 when he passed away. This is for touring, this is for, you know, really enjoying what it is to drive, and it's so different, you know, everything vibrates, so you feel, I think, a much stronger connection to the vehicle itself, and it's a far more inclusive experience. It's not passive, you've got to be paying attention. I feel that at the moment I'm in a privileged position again because I'm young enough to really push her, I think, because for a few years I'd say she's not been used as much because he was, you know, getting a bit more frail. Whereas now I would really like to give her a new lease of life. You know, and I want to get her out on that road. I want to take her around Europe like he used to when he was younger, and kind of see what she can do and push her a little bit more. People approach you and people are interested in the vehicle, they're interested in her story, and that's because she's a really cool car. And I've never driven a cool car before, so it's like all these people are coming out of the woodwork, and you start to realise, you know, cars are actually really interesting and lots of people are interested in them. I think Dodo would be really chuffed with how I've kind of taken on the responsibility for Frisky, because he was so passionate about how she was cared for. I'd be really chuffed about how happy it's made me, because I've had some really great days out so far, and I think he'd be pleased that it's not just being sold.